What's up, guys? Finally, the lottery draft is done, and the Montreal Canadiens are selecting the first overall pick, which is most likely going to be Shane Wright. But there will be a controversial take today. Many of you guys may be upset, especially Habs fans. But we wanted to welcome Data782 for allowing us to collab with him today and sharing his list that we have up right now in terms of who he thinks is going to get drafted in the top 16. And we're going to be, chipping in as well, mentioning a couple of changes here and there. We were thinking about making our own Young Guns list, but again, when it comes to having different opinions on players, it's very hard to make one concrete list. So we decided not to do that and just showcase Matt's and basically make some changes as we go down the list. So, Matt, are you excited to do a breakdown with us in terms of the prospects that are going in the top 16?
Oh yeah, absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to talk prospects. It really forces you to get into it, right? Like you always know a little bit about the draft, but I'm sure as you guys have been doing your research as well, once you dive into it, once you really start looking at things, it makes it more exciting when the draft does come around. So I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to our discussions tonight.
Perfect.
Just for
So,
the record, for everybody watching out there, once again, I've been vetoed on this list a couple times. So just
Vito.
throwing it out there. Yeah, we're gonna get into it right from the start. Already with the number one pick.
okay, so the number one
Oh,
pick that Data 72
huh.
has, which me, Luca, and I agree to, and I think the majority of the people out there, including analysts, agree to, Shane Wright going first overall. So, a guy who's been compared to Patrice Bergeron, very good two-way centerman. As you guys know, the past Stanley Cup winning teams have that one-two punch. Malkin Crosby, Shen O'Reilly, Backstrom Kuznetsov, and so on. So you have Nick Suzuki, but you don't have that second elite centerman. So bringing in Shane Wright makes the sense in terms of the Montreal Canadiens. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, just in my own personal opinion, I know we compare Shane Wright to Patrice Bergeron. I know that there's been comparisons there, but one guy that I think, personally speaking, that nobody really talks about in terms of comparison, I think he reminds me a little bit of what Anze Kopitar is in LA a little
Hmm.
bit. Like he's good, and I think he's a guy that in Montreal that if the Habs do decide to draft him, which I think they will, I think that he's a guy that could definitely turn into an Anze Kopitar for the Canadians in the sense that I think he's a guy that's not going to be maybe a point a game player. He may actually like be a guy that'll get you 70, 75 points in a season, but he's a guy that can do it all, right? And with Nick Suzuki, we've kind of seen his progression a little bit over the last couple of years, and I think every year he's gotten better. I think Nick Suzuki's got more of that defensive style game to him a little bit in the sense that he reminds me a little bit more of Patrice Bergeron, the fact that he plays on the penalty kill. But I think both of them, just in general, are going to be kind of guys that I think are going to be good point getters for the team. But also, I don't know if they're going to be guys that are necessarily going to be point a game players. I know Shane Wright's got a lot of good numbers in the OHL, and he looks good, and I like him. I think he's the consensus number one overall pick. I think that there's a lot more of an all around game there with Shane Wright, and not necessarily just a point from a point getter's perspective. So I do agree from the Bergeron comparison. I just think that he reminds me a little bit more of Anze Kopitar in that sense. But
Essentially, don't expect him to be a 50 goal scorer. Expect him to be
yeah,
more
that
of a
won't. I don't think
playmaker.
that'll happen. But Data, what do you think?
Yeah, that's well said, Luca. That is well said. And if the points ever did come, it would be in the playmaking sense. I believe he does have
Yeah.
that good release. He does have the ability to score, but he is more of a pass first kind of guy. I believe he's a strong playmaking two-way centerman. He does have that capacity to snipe the puck, and he will complement the Habs center core really well, I think. And although Logan Cooley would be a great talent in his own, I do think that Wright is the number one guy. And although it may seem like the consensus number one in terms of 9 out of 10 scouts have him there, it is more of the Taylor Hall versus Tyler Seguin or the Nico Hischier versus Nolan Patrick type of draft where it's in the moment, it could be a bit of a toss up. Down the line, it may be a bit more obvious, but I think that Shane Wright will go number one. He has demonstrated that playmaking and scoring ability. He has 94 points in 63 games with Kingston this year. I don't want to go too deep into thinking Canadians and into the head of Kent Hughes, but I would also be someone who probably argues for give him another year in the OHL. I don't know if I'd say rush him to the NHL just yet.
I
So I
heard
don't
that
know.
he's
Yeah.
actually not returning to the OHL. I don't know if
You've heard
that's
that?
yeah, I saw it. Someone posted it today on Twitter. Again, Twitter is not the most reliable source. I didn't see it anywhere else. It was just one guy that I followed, and he's pretty credible. I forgot his name. I'm not gonna go searching for it, but
Mhm.
I
I,
just
I don't
I
know.
just I just don't think, like, even in terms of Shane Wright, right? Like, I don't see a situation where Shane Wright goes back to the OHL unless he has like a Caulfield rookie year where in his first like 20 games he's got like 2 points. Then you could turn around and say, okay, maybe. But like, I think besides that, I think Shane Wright, regardless of where he gets drafted or who he gets drafted by, I think he plays in the NHL, and I think he plays a full year in the NHL. I don't think it's necessarily about development. I know Montreal's had issues with development in the past, and we've seen that. But I think with Shane Wright, you've got to kind of ease him into it. Maybe not give him a role of first line center right away and throw him on a line with
Yeah,
Caulfield and Suzuki and say, hey, produce.
for sure.
But it's one of those things where maybe you put him on the second line, you put him on the third line, you give him a little bit of responsibility in the sense that you put him on the power play, you put him on the penalty kill, you give him ice time that he needs, but not too much ice time, and you kind of see what the progression is like. If you see that, okay, in this third line role, playing on the penalty kill, playing on the power play, and he's playing really well, then you obviously you can hire his minutes as it goes on. But obviously you don't want to throw him to the wolves right away. In terms of playing on top lines, whatever, because I think you do need to ease him into it. But kind of like what they did with Nick Suzuki, it was a mixed bag at the beginning with Nick Suzuki. They didn't really throw him into it. They kind of eased him into it, and he got better as the season went on. And I think that that's what the approach should be with Shane Wright. Obviously, you're talking about two completely different players in the sense that one's going first overall, where the other one ended up going later on. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I think if you can follow that type of progression in that sense, and maybe even give him a few minutes alongside a guy like Caulfield, I think that could help him as well. So it depends on what the Canadians do. They really can't fuck up this development at all. They gotta get this
I
one
mean,
right.
look,
Oh,
I'm very confident. I think the fan base in Montreal is pretty confident that the um, new management they have in place is very pro development in terms of their youth. We see that with them bringing in Martin St. Louis and the progression he had with guys like Rem Pitlick, Nick Suzuki, especially restoring Cole Caulfield's motivation and seeing what he's capable of in the NHL. So I think, having that in place, especially with Kent Hughes and Gordon at the helm of management as the general manager and as president, I think the Montreal Canadiens are in good hands. And I think because of the last 15 years or 20 years where they were so not used to having any franchise players or elite players coming in from development and making an impact on the team, there's been kind of like this, I don't know, this fear essentially that every guy we draft in the first round is going to be a bust because we just throw him to the wolves and expect him to, produce. And
yeah.
the fan base is also hard on him. So to move before
Well,
the
also the fact that there was no president of development, like in the
yeah, there was
organization
no
the
president
whole
at well,
time
but I mean, like,
Bergevin was there.
there's a lot of things that were missing under Bergevin's helm. Um, but I again, they're making some adjustments. Every GM comes in trying to do better than the last GM. So I mean, look, the last thing I'm gonna say about Shane Wright is that don't expect him to be a franchise or generational talent player like Matthews or McDavid. Expect him to be an all-around good player, an elite talent essentially. So moving on to number two, Data has Logan Cooley. So he's a centerman as well,
Mhm.
American. He's someone that I think that really piqued a lot of people's interest the last couple of months and moved his way up into the top three.
Yeah, well, Logan Cooley, he you use the term franchise and generational. It's difficult because those aren't always defined type titles, but I do see Cooley, in my own words, as a cornerstone type prospect. He's an elite talent. He's been described as a two-way monster. I've even seen a lot of people talk about him being a potential future Selke candidate. So interesting that 1 and 2 are both getting referred to as potential, two-way behemoths. And, he doesn't only thrive in the offensive or defensive zone. He does elite plays on both ends, combined with his face-off ability, his commitment to the 200-foot game. He has a smart stick. He has good hockey IQ. He is someone that every aspiring Stanley Cup winner would want on their team, and every coach would also want on the ice in these kinds of key situations. He can play 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill. That's a small elite group of NHL centers who can boast those abilities. We're talking guys like the Kopitars, like the Barkovs. I'm not saying he'll be like them, but he's going to be in that group of players who does dominate at 5-on-5 and both special teams. He has the hands, the playmaking, the explosive skating, great wrist shot as well. If you've seen him take a shot, he's a great wrist shot. The only thing that may hold him back is his size, but even that shouldn't matter too much when you take into consideration everything I just said. Very smart, very shifty, and throw in the work ethic and his mentality and all that, and the lack of size should be not a big point.
See, the interesting thing with Cooley, and a lot of people are saying, why Cooley when you have Nico Hischier already and Jack Hughes? Well, you could always move Hischier to the wing and play Cooley at center. But
I think
again,
it'll be vice versa. Actually, he sure is a very strong centerman. But your point is exactly right. And to build on that, Cooley definitely goes 2 in my mind. It's just, is it the Devils who select him? That's my only thing.
And that's the point that I was going to make, right? And so this is something that I noticed a couple of times when I was doing some research on Logan Cooley a little bit. He's a Pennsylvania boy, and what's interesting is there's a team at number 5 that I think could use.
I thought Philly was going to select him, because of what happened, they dropped down and New Jersey went up.
Yeah.
That's not possible for the moment. So,
but that's what I'm saying. I think, and I mentioned it right before the podcast started. Actually, I think that the Devils and Philly maybe make a move or make a trade, for the second. I think Philly trades up for the second overall pick. Maybe they give their 5th overall pick to New Jersey. Kind of make a hockey deal in that sense, maybe throw some players in there or whatever. But I could definitely see Philly making a move for a guy like Logan Cooley. And I'm not saying that New Jersey should trade their pick, but, I think for New Jersey, there's a lot more there that New Jersey could do. I think, like we see, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes, we've already got the 2 best. They've already got 2 really good centers in that on that team already. And I don't necessarily think that centers is the best thing for them to go for. Obviously, Slafkovsky would be a really good pickup for them as well. But I think that New Jersey should go for defense. And if you've got the opportunity to pick at 5, you can pick up Jiricek or even Nemec, depending on how the chips fall. And New Jersey potentially gets themselves even an extra player in that deal as well. So it's something that I think for Philly, Philly kind of needs a centerman too. So I think it makes perfect sense. And since he's a Pennsylvania boy, it makes a lot of sense to have Philly there. But I don't know. I mean, look, right now we know that New Jersey's the 2nd overall pick in the draft. But if they do decide to trade it, I would not be surprised to see Philly make a move like that.
Something I would say that could happen is also maybe I know we're not there yet, but maybe Columbus or Buffalo using 2 of their top 16 picks to maybe move up in this year's draft as well. And I mean, obviously, maybe they're gonna, if they want to move up to the top 3, they're gonna have to package maybe a little extra something. But that's something to look at as well. I don't know. It really comes to like needs and how they value a player. And I'm looking at this draft, and it's very close in terms of like talent. And there's no one that really like stands out on this list. Everyone's very close in terms of their value on an NHL roster. It just comes to their needs essentially.
It really comes down to how the team values that player, what their staff is saying about that player, what a little, might be a little interview with a certain player that changes who gets drafted. It's going to come down to those small things.
But sorry, Chris, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna mention the fact that I have Cooley as on my list as a number 3. And the only reason for that is because I don't see the Devils, really drafting a center when they have two really great ones. I see them going more with Slafkovsky, like Luca mentioned. But deep down in my gut, I have a feeling that, if I were the GM of the Habs, I would love to take Cooley over Shane Wright. And I know before everybody gives me the, oh my God, this guy's mental. Uh, Data made an excellent point in describing the way he plays.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the Habs said that they wanted to get a more fast-paced team, and Logan Cooley is just a faster Shane Wright, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So, I mean, I think it would be a perfect fit for the Habs, uh, and I think it could go either or. If I mean, they're obviously going to take Shane Wright because I think Jack Hughes, Luca mentioned it to me off podcast that they're pretty much going with him, from what So
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, I don't look. I think New Jersey views Jack Hughes. I mean, look, he was their first overall selection, right? And Jack Hughes, for me, we've seen how big of a progression he's had in New Jersey over the last couple of years. I think Jack Hughes is going to be a guy that, come next year, I would even say becomes more than a point a game player. That's if he could stay healthy for a full 82 game season as well. And I think that Jack Hughes he's an elite talent. He's a franchise player for New Jersey. I don't see any reason why. So I think that having a guy like Cooley, I'm not obviously adding Cooley just makes that core even better than it already is. But what I'm saying is, in terms of New Jersey, they have other possibilities. They don't necessarily have to go with Cooley. They could go with Slafkovsky,
and
like you said as well.
and
But I think they can also go defense. They need a really good
Yeah,
superstar
well,
defenseman.
some people might even make a
So,
make a point saying that Nico Heischer's always injured, so I mean it'd probably be best to
I mean,
maybe
there was rumors at one point
move
that
past him.
maybe they would consider moving him because of the injuries. Not being a reliable guy, missing a good chunk of the last couple of seasons. But I mean, he is their captain, so I mean, and he is a good player and he is a good leader, especially for his age. So I mean, I think that's just rumors flying around just because
Yeah.
he's been injured for a good portion of his career, but in the NHL. But whatever. But again. Actually, moving on to number three, Slafkovsky going to Arizona. I actually think that 2 and 3 are gonna swap. And
Yeah,
like Chris was saying, the Arizona Coyotes, apart from I think his name is Braden Hayden, right? He's a
Barry Hayton, yeah.
centerman.
Yeah.
Barry Hayden.
You look at their center depth, and it's very weak. After parting ways with Christian Dvorak, especially, and there's also rumors that Schmaltz might get traded as well. I know Schmaltz plays the wing and center, but it's just not promising in terms of their center depth. And having a guy like Cooley, I think makes more sense in Arizona, especially Slafkovsky, who's a big winger that could play on the first line alongside either Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier makes more sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think those two swap, in my opinion.
Plus, he's
Yeah,
used to
it definitely hurt.
stand up in front of a lot of fans.
It definitely hurt to lose a top two selection. The Canadiens and the Coyotes were two teams that really just said, even if we lose number one, we don't get number one, we just want top two. And thankfully, the Canadiens came out number one, but that's a big blow for the Coyotes at 3. Even though they're going to get a great player, it's not necessarily what their organization was looking for.
Yeah, and Slafkovsky, he really established himself at the 2022 Winter Olympics, winning
Mhm.
MVP,
Yeah.
competing against men. Yes, we're aware that there was no NHL players. They're all has-beens, guys playing in Europe and Sweden, Russia, and so on. But for a kid at that age, that's very impressive. And playing for Slovakia, that was very impressive as well. And he deserves every single good thing about him being said about him. He deserves all of it because he's really he defined the odds essentially, and he wasn't even mentioned in the top 5 at one point. He was way lower than that, and this year he really took the next step and enabling himself to find himself in the top 3. And there's also one guy on the list, which is Savoie, which was originally predicted to be in the top 3, which found himself falling down the list, which we're gonna get to very soon. So, are you
But
guys ready to move to number 4,
I just
or
want to say one last thing about Slafkovsky really
okay?
quickly. To me, he reminds me a little bit of what Rantanen is, in the sense that I find he's got a similar style. I think they're both similar players. He's a two-way guy, but I think he's also got a lot of really good elite offensive talent about him. And he gives me a Rantanen vibes. The only concern that I have, if Arizona does draft him is that he'll be playing in Arizona. And it's not to try to disrespect the Arizona Coyotes, but it's to say, we've seen where Arizona's team has been over the last couple of years. They're a team that's not looking to try to win. They're kind of just there just to be there, and they're just saying that they're a hockey team because they have nothing else to do, right?
And one thing I would like to add, actually, sorry to cut you off, but
That's fine.
despite Slafkovsky being 6'3", he's actually not as physical as you guys may think. He's actually more skilled in terms of deking and quick in terms of speed skating.
That's where things like puck protection come in. He doesn't have to be throwing big hits. He has the puck protection ability. He has the hands. He has the mobility. Even though he's 6'3", some places say that he's 6'4", 218 pounds. That is today's NHL power forward, and that's a very high ceiling.
Anyways, moving on to number 4. I think, look, Seattle takes, Data thinks that Seattle should take Simon Nemec. I agree with that. I think Simon Nemec and Jiricek are the 2 best defensemen in the draft. You could argue one's better than the other. You could argue that they're just as good as each other, and it doesn't really matter. I think Nemec is a better defenseman, just in the sense that I think this guy reminds me a little bit of what Quinn Hughes is in Vancouver, in the sense that I think he's a guy that won't get you a lot of goals, but he's a guy that'll set you up on the power play. He's a power play specialist. He's a guy that I think will get you 50 points in the NHL. Maybe even 60 points in the NHL. I just think he's that good. I think the only thing with Simon Nemec that I would say is maybe a concern or something that he needs to improve on, I think, is his defensive game a little bit. I think he makes a lot of risky plays. He's a guy that I've watched a little bit. I watched him a little bit in the World Juniors. I watched him a little bit at the Olympics too. He's a guy that likes to play on the edge a little bit in terms of the way he moves the puck and the way he brings the puck up the ice. And I think that that's something that obviously you can teach as a player, but once you're an offensive defenseman, if you put him next to a guy that's more defensively sound, I think it doesn't really matter that he does those types of plays as long as he's able to make up for it in the end. But like I said, again, he's a power play specialist. I think he's a guy that Seattle exactly needs on this team as
especially
well.
after losing Giordano. I know Giordano plays the left side, Nemec plays the right, but I mean, still having a dominant defenseman after losing Giordano, I think that's a need in terms of Seattle. I know they have to add everywhere. We're aware of that, but having an elite talent like Nemec is a no-brainer. And I know a lot of people may argue that Nemec jumped up in this draft because Jiricek got injured at the World Juniors back in December, early January. So, I mean, I think they're both fantastic defensemen, and if they decide to go to Jiricek or Nemec, they have a fantastic defenseman on their hands.
It's just because Seattle, look, we've already seen, obviously they're a new team. They just came in this year, but I'm saying, we saw what Matty Beniers was capable of doing, right? And I think with Seattle, one of the biggest factors that I noticed this season is their defense was not good at all. And I think that if you add a guy like Nemec, obviously it helps them in the sense that I think they'll get a more offensively minded defenseman, but they'll be able to build their defensive prospect pool, which is something that I think they're lacking a little bit. I think they've got a lot of offensively good players. We saw what Matty Beniers is capable of doing, and I think that if Ron Francis could pick up maybe another first-round pick or trade a few other guys, maybe there's an opportunity there to pick up another guy late in the first round. But I like this pick for Seattle if Seattle ends up going this route. I think Nemec is exactly what Seattle needs at this day and age. And again, it helps them build their future with Beniers being there as well. So I think Nemec is a good pickup. But again, I would not be surprised if they go with Jiricek either. But I do think Seattle picks up a defenseman in the draft. So I agree with Data. I think it's going to be Simon Nemec. But like I said, I would not be surprised if it's also or David Jiricek. So that's my thing. I don't know if you guys want to move on to number 5.
Well, I was just going to add that I think what also keeps Nemec a bit apart from Jiricek is his pedigree. If he had 26 points in 39 games in Slovakia, which made him one of the highest scoring D-men in the history of the league. It's not the greatest league in Europe, but still, just to say that's something. He had 17 points in 19 playoff games as well.
Yeah, that was big.
Yeah, exactly. It's very strong at the U20s. 7 games of solid minutes with Slovakia's bronze medal team at the Olympics, and one of the prospects who in the entire class who would be one of the quickest to make the NHL, I believe, in my opinion. So I think that's what makes him a little bit of a little slight edge. But as you've been saying, Luca, the top two defensemen it's a win-win situation. I just think that Seattle goes Nemec here.
Yeah, I agree too.
And moving on to number 5, you have Savoie. And my question to you, Data, is do
Mhm.
you have him being drafted because of the loss of Claude Giroux?
Yeah, I think that really opens up a big hole. Whether or not Giroux was still on the Flyers, they needed a future first line center prospect. So I think that the loss of Claude Giroux maybe expedites this a little bit. He kind of fast tracked it, saying, okay, we just realized that we got to get this going because now we have Sean Couturier, who's elite, Selke candidate, everything, but he just went from number 2 to number 1. Who's our new number 2? Maybe Kevin Hayes. We got to get somebody in the system. We got to start moving more quickly.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
Flyers, they have an interesting prospect pool, and I don't see them as having a deficiency in any one area. Like some people think that maybe defense would be something, maybe Jiricek at 5, but
That's
they
what
do
I
have
have
they
essentially.
do have
Jiricek
Cam
at 5.
York, and you can't put all your eggs in Cam York's basket, but they do have a defenseman who they used a high pick on already. With Matthew Savoie being someone who is thought of as a 1, 2, or 3 kind of guy, who is still good but has dropped because of the performances of other players, I think just saying getting him at 5 is no problem at all. What really
well,
makes me laugh is that as you're looking through all these rankings, you go through other people's lists, and you have Craig Button. I cannot stand Craig Button's lists. This guy has him going at 17. So I don't know
yeah.
how this is possible. Like, yeah, maybe
Wow.
he's not top 5,
But,
maybe he's not top 6, 7, but to have him going at 17 just makes me laugh.
but
I have him at 8 going to Detroit.
Sure.
I feel like that's I feel like he's gonna fall a bit more. The Flyers do need a center. But
well,
Apart
not
from Larkin,
who do you have Philly picking, Chris?
I have Philly's number 5. I have Philly picking. I have Philly picking Nemec. So I had Jiricek going to Seattle, and
Okay.
Okay.
I think regardless, Philly. The defense is okay, but I think it could improve their defense even
Okay.
Yeah,
more.
for
So,
sure.
so
that's
That's
kind
been
why
a
of
it's like
problem
they're
for
not
years,
especially
though.
strong or weak anymore. It's
So
just that they need it. They need new prospects in their pipeline
so,
all
so
yeah,
around.
I
so
think
that's what I did in terms of my list, and I feel like Savoie is one of those players that I feel like Steve Eiserman will take and kind of like try to shape him into like because there's a lot of potential there. I feel like if he goes to like a wrong team, they might
Hey,
ruin his
Steve Eisman was a
development. And
centerman himself.
yeah,
Hmm.
so
well,
I feel like that he would I think that's where he might end up. But I mean, if Philadelphia has the chance to grab him, I could see that happening too. But him going 17th, I completely disagree with that one.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
Yeah,
kind of nuts.
that's a
well,
stretch.
one
there's a
thing, one
couple other Craig Button that I'll refer to
I
later
have
on.
Criticize.
an off the board guy on this list, but I mean, like for him to go, that's kind of that's
Like
kind of
I
we're
edge.
all aware that Savoie did drop in the projections, but like to that extent, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I
it's
I
ridiculous.
don't know, man. But moving on to number 6, so you have Juracek,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and I agree with them drafting a defenseman, and I
absolutely.
do think it would be Juracek at number 6. But then again, um, I actually had Cutter Gauthier,
Mm,
left winger. I know you have him 10th on your list.
yeah,
I don't know. I was just thinking more offensively because I don't know. I just look at their offense essentially, and I feel like they're just missing something. In terms of their defense, it's shaping up to be pretty impressive. You have Jake Bean, you have Rowinski, you have Bachvist.
hmm.
It's not as bad as people think, but I look at
No, it
their
isn't.
offense and I just don't know. Like, there's the whole question mark about Liney uh, potentially leaving, so that weakens the left wing. Nyquist, how many years does he have really left? Eric
Mm.
Robertson's been pretty impressive. Ken
But
Johnson, that's a good prospect as well. You have Igor Chakov,
Chilikov.
Chinakov. Yeah, sorry, I always butcher names. So I mean, on the left wing, it's pretty impressive, but they need somebody that's gonna solidify their first line on the left wing, and I think Gotze would be that guy. But I mean, then again, would you really want to pass up on a guy like Juracek at number 6 to
I have
solidify your
I
defense?
have them grabbing Geeky.
Yeah, geeky.
Yeah, I mean, I see
Nah.
him going really
I think
low on a lot of lists, but I like, I like the way he plays, and they do
Geeky was higher
kind
in,
of
at one point.
they do kind of need a center as well.
No, I like geeky a lot, but they have Kent Johnson, they have Liam Foodie, they have Cole Sillinger, they have centers in their
Yeah,
system.
their centers are not bad. It's more like the wing, I would say, in their defense
Well, I
because they
mean,
did
centers
lose
could always
Seth
move through.
Jones. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Seth Jones. Despite many people saying that he's overrated, he's not worth the contract that he signed in Chicago. It's still a big loss to have.
Mhm.
And
Well,
I mean, at the moment, Kent Johnson, by the way, just to refer to what you're saying, he's currently playing left wing. I don't know if they're going to keep him on the wing or they're going to transition him to go back to center. But I don't know what their plans are essentially for
It's
Kent
interesting.
Johnson.
The Blue Jackets have always been like that. Domi was a center left wing. I think Alex Texier is center left wing. Like Pierre-Luc Dubois was who was going to be like their center, and they trade him away. I think Ken Johnson does end up going back from the wing to the center position because that's where they'll be lacking, and they don't need to go out and necessarily draft more because they're in their system.
yeah. Well, I think, look, in terms of what Columbus needs, I mean, look, Juracek's a really good player. I think we talked about before with Nemec, it's pretty much interchangeable. I think both are pretty much similar players in that sense. But like for Columbus, I think they've already got a lot of offensively gifted players. I think they need to focus more on their defensive side of things, and I think Juracek makes them better.
Mhm.
I do, and also Columbus has 2 picks in this draft, right? So one thing that I think is really important, and Data emphasized this before we came on the podcast, that the defense in the top 20 there's not really many, right? And I think if you have an opportunity, especially if you're Columbus, because you have 2 first-round picks, especially first in the top 12, I think it gives you an opportunity to kind of take your defenseman at 6 because there are a lot of really good offensive players within the 12 to 15 range that I think with their second pick, they maybe go with a forward. So I think for Columbus, it makes a lot of sense to go with Juracek, especially if he becomes available at 6, because I think it's a safe pick for them. And they already have another pick at 12 where they can go and pick up their forward if they need to. So, and a guy like Cutter Gauthier could potentially fall to 12 anyway.
Yeah.
So they could end up picking Juracek and Cutter Gauthier in that sense
Columbus
as well.
and Buffalo are in beautiful spots, in my opinion.
That's very well said there because, you don't always want to put your eggs in everybody's baskets. Yes, Werenski was the pillar for years to come. You gave him his big contract. Adam Boquist is there. Andrew Peak is great. Jake Bean is great. But when the opportunity presents itself and you can have the top 2 of Werenski, Juracek, your number and your second pair you can allow those guys to have a little less ice time and not force Jake Bean to be a number 1 guy or anything like that. Those are the teams that thrive the most. So Juracek, I was going to get into some of my thoughts about him before we move on. Just textbook 2-way D, very steady, flows very well when he skates, has good command of the blue line. He enjoys getting involved with the play. He has a really hard shot. He reads the game well. And if he hadn't missed those 3 months with that knee injury, he may very well be the top-ranked D-man of his class. So I find it ironic as well that the Blue Jackets are making this selection with the pick that they got in the package with Adam Boquist when they sent Seth Jones to the Blackhawks. So we'll see if this trade ends up being Seth Jones in exchange for David Juracek, Adam Boquist, and other picks that are still yet to be named.
I mean, if that's the case, holy crap, man. Columbus
fleece,
won that deal. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I do. I got to say, the Juracek, I'm very excited to see him in the NHL. He was a big piece of my Seattle Kraken franchise mode on NHL 22.
I watched the video, by the way. It was... you did good. You did good.
Thank you very much. I like Juracek a lot, and it would be fun to see him go number 4 to Seattle. But I don't see him getting much further than 6 here. I think he has to go somewhere off the board pretty early because if it wasn't for that knee injury, he might be even higher.
Yeah. Well, I think moving on to number 7, I kind of like this pick because I kind of agree with it as well.
I have him at the same position.
I have him at the same spot as well. But one thing that's interesting with Ottawa here is this is exactly the type of player they need. It's not even a question. Like, I think if there's one team in this draft that you turn around and you say this guy, like they need somebody, it's Ottawa. I think Kemmel's exactly what Ottawa needs. He's a goal scorer, which is exactly what Ottawa lacks. right? Obviously, they've got Batherson and they've got Kachuk and they've got Norris. But I think with Kemmel, he's got the opportunity to become a 30-goal scorer in the NHL. And I think Ottawa, in their rebuild, one of the biggest things that they struggled with is defense, right? But we know that with Juracek and Nemec, chances are they go in the top 6. So if Ottawa has the opportunity here, you take Kemmel. And I think you take Kemmel because it bolsters your offensive core, but I think it finally puts Ottawa in a position where they now have a really deadly offensive core. You've got Kachuk, you've got Norris, you've got Batherson.
I mean, the wingers are going to be out of this
You
world.
add Kemmel to that list. It's
Batherson,
good.
Stutzel, Kemmel, like that's very impressive to have.
I would take that even a
6.
step further, Luca. I would take it even a step further. You think he could be a potential 30-goal scorer? I could see him even getting to 40 because
Really?
he scored 15 goals in 39 games in Liga in Finland. Extrapolate that. Let's say he played 82 games in Liga. That would have been a 32-goal season, and that's in Liga as a rookie. Put him in the NHL, give him a few years of development, and I don't know if you saw his numbers in the split between the two halves of the season. The guy had, out of his 23 points in 39 games, 18 of those came in the first 16 games. 18 points in 16 games to start the season in Liga. It was the next 16 games that were a bit curious, as he only managed to score one more point. But shoulder injury, injury at the World Junior Championship, all that stuff, he didn't end up returning to play until late January, and he couldn't quite recapture that early season magic. But I think scouts are putting a little bit too much stock into the slow second half, and teams, even if it's at 7, teams from 1 to 6 or even 3 to 6 are missing out on a very elite talent as Kemmel drops to 7. He's the number 2 ranked European skater, really flying under the radar as in comparison to what he should be in, like if he was in another draft, for example. Although I do have him going at number 7, I could potentially see him going, dropping a spot or 2 if teams are getting nervous. But at the same time, I could also see a team like Philadelphia or Columbus, if they really like him for some reason, they could also want to go a bit more heavier on wingers.
Do you think his playing style? We all know that his shot is the secret. The main weapon, the main thing that everyone is so infatuated with, right? But the physical play, because we all know he really engages in that. He goes after the puck. He likes to take a hit. He likes to give a hit. We've seen that with a lot of players in NHL that when they're very aggressive. It's also, Ovechkin has that style, but he also is built for that style. Kemmel is not built for that style. So he's undersized in my opinion. At 5'11", 5'10", well, close to 5'11". I think he's gonna have a hard time, staying healthy if he continues playing that style of game. Unless they surround him with players that are physical and are going to chase the puck and go to the corners and get the puck and retrieve it and get it to him so he could take that shot and get those goals, like you're saying, 30 to 40 goals. But I feel like if he continues playing this physical type of game, I don't think he's gonna have a long career, to be honest.
Well, I think
it's like gonna be like Gallagher, kind of career.
I mean, he is better than Gallagher, but
no, but I mean, he's taking beatings and stuff.
I see what you mean, Chris.
I don't think he's gonna play as long as Joe Thornton, obviously.
This is going to be really interesting now, because moving on to number 8, this is the first time that I'm actually going to disagree with Data. So he has Brad Lambert at 8. I'm not saying that that's a bad selection or a bad place to have him. I just personally like Jonathan Lekaramaki better. I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I think this makes the most amount of sense for them as well. Detroit loves their European players, but one thing that Detroit loves too is their Swedish players. And Jonathan Lekaramaki is Swedish, and we all know that Detroit and Sweden, goes together. We know how, a lot of the Swedish players they had in the past, Henrik Zetterberg being one of them,
Nick Lidstrom,
Nick Kronwall as well. So they've had a lot of really good Swedish players, and I think that if Detroit has an opportunity here, especially with Jonathan Lekaramaki and how well he's been and how underrated he's gone by a lot of scouts as well, I think it's really important to take that into consideration. I think Lambert's a good player, and I think that there's a lot of stock and a lot of uncertainty with Lambert, and I think that that's why at 8 it's a little bit too high for me, at least. I think with Lekaramaki, you know what you're getting. You know the type of player that he is, and I think it fits what Detroit's trying to build. They're a young core. They have Lucas Raymond there as well. I think there's a partnership there that could be made with Lucas Raymond, and obviously they've got Seider. And I think adding Lekaramaki to that group, I think just makes their team much better. And I like Lekaramaki a lot. Like I mentioned before, he's an underrated player. And I think if, there's definitely an opportunity for Detroit to do something here. So I like Lekaramaki at 8. I think it makes the most amount of sense for them. But I want to know what you guys think, obviously.
No, I like those thoughts very much. And honestly, I do have Lambert and Lekaramaki being interchangeable there at 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about Detroit, right? All the things you said earlier still apply with Yzerman loves, and the Red Wings have a history for these European players, all that. I think that just Lambert, he screams a Detroit type of player, just like Lekaramaki does. And it's not necessarily that Lambert's the 8th rated player in this draft. It's just that I think that he's the guy Detroit takes, even though Lekaramaki may be ranked 8 above Brad Lambert. So he's a prospect who's been talked about for a long time. He's been on radars for this draft since like 2019. He's had some difficulty. He started playing in Finland during 2019-20. He's played 99 professional games, which is a lot for a prospect who's been in a league with men, but 27 points through those 99 games, had only 4 points in 25 games this year. His best hockey was at the World Juniors. He scored 5 points in 2 games. There's a little flash of brilliance. And he might be a project. He probably will be a project. But with the right coaching, I think that there's a lot when it comes to the raw skill. Fantastic speed, good hands, just needs to develop a little bit of that hockey, well, a lot of that hockey IQ. And it's hard to say whether or not a team who thinks that they have the right system would want to reach on Lambert. But if you ask me, I think a safe place would be in the 8 to 12 range, with 12 really being the lowest. Like, again, Craig Button, he has him at 35. 35.
What?
It doesn't make sense. So I really see him being in the 8 to 12, 8 to 13 max range. I really think he goes 8 or 9, honestly, but no lower than 12. And he's a guy that Steve Yzerman could really shape. So he's someone that they kind of jump for, similar to Moritz Seider in the sense that he kind of comes out of left field, and the Red Wing, a couple years later, everyone's laughing because, like Yzerman's laughing because he's probably going to win the Calder. But in the moment, it may be a bit of a shock, and I could see Lambert being the pick here at number 8.
Well, like me and Chris and I were saying before, we see Detroit going after a centerman because you look at, outside of Larkin, is there really like an elite talent, to really like back him up, And when you look at all the championship teams, right? Like I was saying before about Shane Wright, you need a 1-2 punch, and Larkin needs that guy. And I think, like you were saying, he could be a project, or maybe we've seen flashes of brilliance at the World Juniors. I remember like people heading into that tournament, people were saying, Lambert, he's falling down in terms of the projection and where he's going to get drafted. He heads into the World Juniors and he starts showing what he's capable of, and people are like, holy crap, him and Kemmel are really connecting. They're clicking. They were the best. They were part of the best line at the World Juniors for Finland and in the whole tournament. So, I mean, I think he's capable of being that second guy below Larkin, and having Steve Yzerman being, a legendary player who was a centerman for the Detroit Red Wings. I think he will help Lambert in his progression.
So one thing I want to switch it up now and go to Buffalo. And the reason I want to go to Buffalo is because Data actually made me change this pick, even if he doesn't have the same player that I do at number 9. He made me change this pick because I originally had Pavel Mintyukov at number 9. I actually changed this pick to Connor Geekie. The reason for that is I think with Buffalo, I didn't come to the realization until just about like 2 minutes ago that Buffalo's already got really good defense. They've got Rasmus Dahlin, they've got Owen Power. And I think for Buffalo, it's going to be more about building their offense. And I think for me, at number 9, I think there's a guy that I think a lot of people may have like higher in their rankings, in the sense that I think he might go, in the mid-range between 12 and 15, maybe a little bit lower than that. But I have him at number 9. I think Connor Geekie's a guy that goes to Buffalo. I think he's exactly the type of player that the Sabres need. The Sabres are a young team. We know what they're capable of doing. We know that, with Jack Eichel being gone, they need that center to kind of go back and replace them. And obviously with we saw with Tage Thompson this season how well he played and how important that was for the Sabres. And obviously they've got a few other guys as well that have really kept up with them. Olofsson's a guy that played really well. Dylan Cousins takes another step. But I think if you pick up a guy like Connor Geekie, you're kind of putting yourself in a position to now have a 1-2 punch for the future. And obviously, look, I don't think Connor Geekie is a guy that's going to be a first-line center in the NHL, but I think with Dylan Cousins and Connor Geekie, it builds your center core in a much better way. And obviously, with the fact that there's no other, in my opinion, elite centers after Wright, Cooley, and Savoie, I think that with Geekie, you're getting a good guy that can play on the second line for you in the future, and you could potentially have him and Cousins kind of rotate in the future as well. So I'm going to go with Connor Geekie at number 9 for Buffalo. I don't know what you guys have. I know that Data has Lekaramaki.
So essentially,
also
what
a
you're
good
trying to
pick.
say here is that Tage Thompson's going to move from center to wing. Jeff Skinner is going to be gone in a matter of like the next year or two.
I don't know about that.
If they can move
Tough
that,
contract.
if they can move that
Tough
contract.
contract, yeah.
So Katie Middlestat moves down in the lineup, and Connor Geekie takes that second
I
line
would.
spot.
I don't like Casey Middlestat a lot. I don't think he's really that. I think he's kind of his
And
time in
Dylan
Buffalo.
Cousins is the first line
kind of-
center.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Cousins is a first line center, like one of the he reminds me a little bit of like the lower tier first line center, but I think he can become that. And I think with Geekie, you've got a good second line center who can also play first line minutes if he needs to at some point as well. So it's a good to rotate. I think it's a good way to rotate both of them. I don't think there's a clear cut number one center there, but I think with Buffalo, it's a safe pick to go with a guy like Connor Geekie, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I think they would have to go after a centerman because you look at their wings, Victor Olofsson, Peyton Krebs, Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson if he moves to the wing, if they get a centerman at this year's draft. I think they're set. They're top 6. It's set for the next at least 5 to 6 years. I don't see why they would go draft a winger. But I mean, look, like Data was saying before, there's certain guys that you can't go based off needs. If there's somebody that drops down and he's the best player available at the draft in that position, you draft that guy. So I mean, if that's the case with Lekaramaki, like you just take him, I guess.
Yeah, starting from 8, I start to see these picks as being pretty interchangeable. Like if I have Geekie at 15 and then he ended up getting drafted at 9, I wouldn't even bat an eye. Like I wouldn't say like, what, that's a crazy reach or anything like that. That's what this draft is. And I just want to add, Luca, you have him going at 9. Our good friend Craig Button has him at 31.
Who is this guy? He fucking
Craig, the head of scouting
Who
of
the fuck
CSN.
is that?
Actually, what
I know who he is, but I meant like
But
I was
what a
quoting
title, right?
McGregor.
They just picked it out of a hat.
But I think what I really like, okay, and I know we were quick on number 9, but I want to move on to number 10 because I actually agree with you. This is, I think, the one that I agree with the most. Cutter Gauthier at Anaheim at number 10, I think I have him at number 10 as well. I think Chris has him at number 10 as well, if I'm not mistaken. But for me, Cutter Gauthier to Anaheim it makes the most amount of sense. This is another team that struggled to score goals. Cutter Gauthier has scored a lot of goals in the U.S. National Development Program as well, USDP this year. Obviously, he played a few games with Logan Cooley as well. So Gauthier, he's got a great shot. He's got an elite shot. He's a guy that I think will score a lot of goals in the NHL. And I think the Ducks need that. They need a goal scorer. They need a guy that's going to put the puck in the net. And I think that they get that exact type of player.
I see him playing on the second line. Obviously, Zegras is going to be on the first. He's a left winger as well.
I think he can play on the first line with Zegras. I don't see any issues. There's a American connection there too, U.S. National Development Program connection.
I see them playing on it with each other essentially on the power play.
Yeah, but I just think in general, I think it just makes a shit ton. I think it makes a shit ton of sense for the Ducks to go after him. I think that's their guy at number 10. I think that has to be their guy.
I think when it comes to wingers, like I think the Anaheim Ducks have great wingers. I don't see the need of them, going to probably get another one. I think they lack on center,
especially with Getzlaf retiring.
And Getzlaf retiring, and you have like another, a couple centers on this team that are like getting up there in age too that probably need, they need to change.
Henrique is one of them.
Yeah, that's why Chris, like if you see it, like if let's say a team were to go like 8 or 9 and were to take Cutter Gauthier, that's exactly where Anaheim comes in and says, "Thank you very much. We'll take Jonathan Lekaramaki."
Well, see, I went off the board on this one. I went to Ostland.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he would be a really great fit on the Ducks. I mean, and I've seen only one other person mentioning him, and I think he's Chris. I don't know what you said that he was supposed to go as. I think he's top 20. I think, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
said I said I could
Top
see
20.
him.
He's about top 20. He's about
I
top
could see
20.
him falling down to the top 20.
Yeah, but I think he's very overlooked. I think he would be perfect with Anaheim, to be honest, as a second line center. Maybe start him off as a third. I think he's extremely talented. And when it comes to wingers with Anaheim, I mean, listen, they've had enough. I think they have enough young talented wingers, and you have
I
some
disagree. But
aging cent. Well, who? Why do you disagree? Who's
If
on
you
Anaheim as a wing who can't score? Yeah, come on, Troy
well,
Terry's.
okay, let's go. Maxim Comtois didn't have a good season. Sonny Milano, okay, fine, I'll give it to you. Troy Terry, okay, fine, I'll give it to you, and then that's it.
Well, Maxime Comtois, dude. I mean, like he's gonna
he
bounce
needs a
back.
change of scenery, I
And
But
think.
that's what
he's
I'm
a
saying.
young player,
Dude,
and
there's nobody else in that system
well,
that's a
besides,
goal scorer.
all
And
right, well,
McTavish is a center. So you're talking about them needing a center. McTavish is
besides
a center.
besides
So
Zegras, well, McTavish. I mean, yeah, I guess you do. Well, I mean,
so
listen, McTavish could also play wing too, huh?
yes, but I'm saying McTavish is primarily a center
Zegers
too.
could actually
Yeah, but
play
there's
center
McTavish,
too.
there's Sam Steele, there's Isaac
But that's what I'm
Lundstrom.
saying.
I think the Ducks are okay at center.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And
I think a
Zegers could play
winger makes
center
more
as well.
sense.
He's played a couple games at the center position this season.
Yeah,
So
I see him being a center in his career. Maybe not right now, because if you have Adam Henrique, who's a solid two-way guy, you put him. But I think I see Zegras
yeah,
gravitating
I'm
towards the
okay with the
center.
Gauthier pick. I think it makes sense in the left wing. I look at Sonny Milano.
Yeah.
Yes, he did have a good season, but he's not that guy that everyone had these high expectations with when he was drafted by Columbus, saying, "Oh my God, look at that! Look at his hands. He probably has the best hands since Patty Kane." Like, come on, guys, give me a break. Anyways, let's move on to number
I was
11.
going to throw in one last thing before we move on here. Like,
Okay,
let's, for example, in that example I last gave, if Cutter Gauthier does go at 9, for example, to Buffalo, and Lekaramaki is there for 10 for Anaheim, he is such a good goal scorer. He has one of the best shots in this draft. He's the kind of guy that, okay, we have too much centers. He can go to the wing and he can be deadly. He gets set up in his office a la Ovechkin or Stamkos. He is one of those guys that is just pure goals, goals, goals. 20 goals in 26 games in the SHL Junior League. I think that he's going to be one of the best goal scorers of this draft, even though he might not be the best player or the best whatever. I think when it comes to shooting, goal scoring, it's going to be good. So Anaheim, regardless, whoever it is. And as you said, now we can move on to number 11. To the San Jose Sharks, next California team. I think that they go defense on this one. I think that they got to start thinking about their future. They have Merkley in the system, who's been up and down. Ferraro's been good, but with Carlson, Burns, Vlasic, and company kind of moving on, it's gonna be good to get him mentored. It's gonna be Pavel Mintyukov, who I have there from the OHL.
I agree with that one.
62 points.
too.
I also have him at 11.
There we go, perfect. All in agreement. 62 points
It's
in 67 games. He good size, left shot, gifted offensively. You just got to work on the D zone and positioning, and that's what the mentoring is going to do with those guys
Their
in
decor is
San
very
Jose.
old and on bad contracts. All three of them. I would say.
Exactly. But I'll give you one last comment here. There was a Sabres analyst who gave his thoughts on Mintyukov, and he said it's very reminiscent of watching Rasmus Ristolainen in the sense that the tools are there. He's a physical specimen, but he's watching a lot of times of him trying to piece together the thought process behind some of his moves. So give me that raw talent, put him in a good system with Carlson, Burns, Vlasic, etc. Don't leave him alone in the desert and in the jungle like Rasmus Ristolainen was in Buffalo. Actually give him a system that will allow him to grow, and Mintyukov could be a really elite defenseman with San Jose.
And that's I agree with that 100%. I think San Jose needs defensemen in this draft, and I think Mintyukov is the next man up. I think that obviously there's a lot of defensemen here between 11 and 15. I know you have a few of them on your list as well, Data. But I think for me, Mintyukov makes the most amount of sense because I think he's got the best raw talent out of the defenseman that's left, and I think there's an opportunity for him to really break out and become a really good defenseman in this league. I think I see him as a top 4 defenseman for San Jose, which I think is something that they need a lot. And I think for us, I think with the fact that we all have him in the same position, I think shows that we all kind of agree that this is the pick that San Jose needs to make. So which is good. But I think moving on to number 12, unless anybody wanted to have other comments,
No, I think we're all in
but
agreement.
I think
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
moving on to number 12 and kind of what I mentioned before, Columbus goes with Juracek at 6. I agree, and I also have Danila Yurov going 12 to Columbus. I think Columbus wins this draft, and the reason I say that is because I think Yurov's really really underrated as well. I know he's
Very much.
struggled. I think he struggled in different situations this year, and I know that a lot of people have had him in different positions. I know Yurov's kind of moved. There was a moment where in time during the year where he was top 5. There was another moment during the year where he was in the top 20, and now he's kind of figured himself out and put himself back in that top 10 category, top 15. Look, the guy has 36 points in 23 games. He's been really, really good for the Russian team. And it's been really, really good and stuff for him as well to just kind of have that situation for him moving forward. But I think what's interesting with Yurov is, he's a guy that, look, 21 games in the KHL, didn't score a single point, and in the playoffs too, didn't score a single point. That's on limited minutes. I think if he's given an opportunity in the NHL, I think if he's given an opportunity on the top line of the NHL, on a team like Columbus that's still trying to find themselves as a team and rebuilding, and obviously you've got Line A over there as well. I think that if you're able to kind of slot him in and kind of find a spot for him in Columbus, I think it could really work out for him. I think he's a guy that's underrated and underappreciated. And I think that
He is underrated, but I disagree with you.
he could definitely be considered a steal of a pick. At least in my opinion. So
Central Scouting in the European Skaters, they dropped him from number 3 to number 7 in their final rankings. So I think just the one thing that scares people is that it's the truth though. He's a few years away. He's not going to be a guy who gets drafted right away and comes into the NHL right away. He's going to be a guy who gets drafted, spends 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years in the KHL. I'd lean more in the 3 category, but that's why a team may say we need to have the depth that can allow him to grow. That's why let's say the Blue Jackets didn't take him at 12, I think the Islanders definitely take him at 13 because
that's what I was going to say.
They do have the wingers and the depth and the yes, it's an aging core, but it's a core that can still stay in place. It doesn't need ASAP resuscitation. It can still survive.
The reason why I have Yurov at number 13, and this is a problem that, that's pretty evident in terms of the Islanders, goal scoring. And everyone says, Barzal is suffering because he doesn't play with an elite sniper or a guy who essentially scores a lot, right? Adding a guy like Yurov on that line, because we all know Barzal plays left wing, he's going to be playing the right wing. Getting a guy like Yurov, and obviously it's going to be a couple years until he makes that team. I'll give him, let's say, 2 years, 3 years until he cracks the Islanders. But I have him going at 13 because they lack goal scoring. And I think he would be perfect on a line with Barzal, someone who could pass him the puck, find him when he's open, take shots on net. Especially, I see him very useful on the power play as well. And people might blame Trotz's system. I think Trotz is a very good coach. I think it's just Lou's decision to add all these aging veterans.
Well, then who do you have at 12 then, Chris?
Number 12, actually, so going back to what you were saying, Lambert would be most at 12. I have Lambert at 12 because
that's why I have as well.
Because yes, there's Sillinger, but Roslovich, there's been rumors that they're not really happy with him and they want to move on from him.
Well, it wouldn't be crazy, the Blue Jackets love their Finnish players. Jarmo Kekalainen loves his Finnish players.
And that's another reason why I put him on number 12.
So I want to move on to number 13, and the reason why is because it kind of relates to Brad Lambert. I have Brad Lambert at 13. Now, before anybody turns on and says, Brad Lambert to the Islanders, listen. Brad Lambert is the type of player that I think can be a top 5 player in this draft if he lives up to the potential that I think a lot of people believe he has. The thing is, and Data brought it up before, he's a project, and I think with the Islanders, I made this list before Barry Trotz got fired, so I didn't take Barry Trotz getting fired into consideration when I did this, but I personally think that Brad Lambert is the type of player that I think could go to the Islanders and change the way they play. What I mean by that is he's very skilled. He's a skilled player. I think the Islanders lack a lot of that. They don't really have a skilled guy except for I think Matt Barzal, in my opinion. And I think that if you bring in a guy with a little bit more pizzazz and flair, like Brad Lambert does, I think the Islanders can have a really exciting core there with Barzal and Lambert. And I think that it just makes a lot of sense. I think he's a guy that, if, like I mentioned before, he's a project, but he's a guy that if he lives up to his potential, could become one of the best players in this draft. And I think the Islanders kind of need that. They kind of need a guy that's going to be able to put um, the puck in the net, but also just generate offense. And that's something that the Islanders have lacked for a while, is offense. I think Korchinski, for me, I think he's more defensively. He's a defenseman first of all, and I think the Islanders don't really need defensemen. I think they're more looking at a forward core, and like we mentioned in the Barry Trotz video that we did, the Islanders need goal scoring. And I think Brad Lambert is going to provide that for the Islanders. Maybe not right away, but definitely in the future. So I have Brad Lambert going 13 to the Islanders.
And I'm very interested on why you chose who you chose on number 13 data, because I feel like that's more like off the boards in terms. So I just wanted to hear more of an explanation of why you chose him.
Well, what Luke is saying about Brad Lambert, I see Brad Lambert kind of as the Atu Ratti of this draft, if you remember him from last year.
Yes.
A player that the Islanders took in the second round, a guy who was supposed to be top 3, top 5, had some troubles in Finland and dropped. Exact same story as Brad Lambert. I don't think he'll drop as far as second. That's the second round, but I do think that he's going to drop. Instead of top 3, he's going to be top 15. So the Islanders making that move here wouldn't be far-fetched. But at the same time, it depends if he's wing or center, because the Islanders have Ratti, they have Ishakov, they have Barzal, of course. I'm not sure if they go center there. And they aren't super desperate necessarily for winger help right now with their current guys. Yes, it's going to come over time. I went defense here because they have their core of Pulock and Pelech, and I just wonder who their future is with, because their future is Noah Dobson, but they don't really have anybody else. They have Salo in their system, but they don't have much else aside from that. I think in a draft where a lot of the offense is going early, where unless one of the bigger guys drop, like Urov, for example, they're going to be left with a choice of there's Korchinski, there's Matejchuk, there's maybe a guy like Nazar, there's maybe a guy like Isaac Howard or Jimmy Snuggerud. There's other guys like that. But I do see it being Korchinski. He is not someone that the Islanders have had a lot of experience with. He, in terms of playing style, it's not really Islanders hockey. And similar to what Lucas said about Lambert changing the type of style that the Islanders play. The Islanders defense has always been the Andy Green type of defense, the Zdeno Chara kind of defense, these older...
Those guys are all gone.
And those guys are going to be gone, right? So I could really see them kind of shaking things up and saying, okay, Noah Dobson's been great. Let's continue this with Korchinski. And 6'2", smooth skater, good offensive upside. His defensive game must continue to develop, and that's where Pulock and Pelech, Mayfield, all these guys who are strong defensively will come in, because he has the tools to be a successful top 4 guy, but it would be a couple of years away. So he needs support in that pipeline. And I'm not trying to say that Korchinski has to be the guy, but I do see the argument for it being him. And the Islanders will have to really look inward and think, okay, we're having a new coach coming in. This is our current core that's aging. What is our direction? And I see it being that Korchinski Lambert type of thing to start to change it up and complement Matt Barzal.
And moving on to number 14, I agree with this pick, because Winnipeg's defense the last couple of years, I mean, I would say ever since Dustin Byfuglien left and Ben Sherratt, has been a big issue. I know they tried bringing in Dylan and Schmaltz, but that didn't work out this year. They failed to make the playoffs. Hellebuck needs good quality defensemen in front of him. He can't do it all, right? So Matejchuk, I think, is the perfect fit in terms of adding defense. And at number 14, I think that's very good for them.
It's tough because a lot of the defense in this class are very offensively minded. Aside from you have Nemec and Jiricek, who are strong two-way offensive type guys, but Matejchuk, I see him more offensive minded. And the Jets already have Ville Heinola, but regardless, they need defense because they've given themselves a good pantry of offensive type players. Is Christian Vesalainen going to develop guys like that? Is Pierre-Luc Dubois going to continue to develop into the solid top six center? Those are the other questions that they can have. But at the same time, they have Connor Hellebuyck getting just bombarded left and right. You have Josh Morrissey working like an absolute animal with like 30 minutes a night because their whole team got messed up due to Dustin Byfuglien. So, they just got to start stockpiling some defense here. Matejchuk, 64 points, 65
Sean
games.
Couture's a good defenseman.
He could develop into a top 4D, absolutely. He could be one of those guys who does power play and penalty kill if he is just developed correctly. With Ville Heinola already in the pipeline. I just want to finish on Matejchuk with this one quote from a scout. I found it very interesting. He said, in the 2022 draft, there isn't a player I enjoy watching more on a nightly basis than Matejchuk. He is a unicorn as a defender because there isn't an archetype that he really fits into. So this makes him polarizing in terms of categorizing and ranking. Yeah. So it depends. Is Winnipeg willing to take a chance on a player like that who can be very offensive, can be strong defensively, a bit of a unicorn, a bit of a question mark? So that's going to be the question.
Do you think he drops because of his size?
I don't think so. He's what, 5'10", 5'11"?
He's 5'11".
5'11"? I don't know. I don't know if he drops because of that. I definitely see him being the fourth ranked D-man. I don't think he necessarily moves ahead of Korchinski or definitely not Mintyukov. He's in that 4-5 range. Is it because of his size? That plays into it a little bit, but I don't think it would be a huge
amazing skater, very dynamic,
yes.
Very good hockey IQ. So I mean, look, especially for Winnipeg, that they're a very offensive-minded team. I know, like you were saying before, you need more of a two-way defenseman or more of a defensive defenseman to help Hellebuyck. But can you really pass up on a guy like this? You know what I mean?
That's the thing. Can you pass up on him? And if on my board Connor Geekie is still available here, it would be so tempting to take him because he's a Manitoba boy. He's playing on the Winnipeg ice, but 3 of Winnipeg's top 5 prospects are already centermen. So it's tough to say, do they go for another centerman? Even though
the spot's opening with Stastny probably walking away.
That's it. So Stastny's spot opens up. Is Mark Scheifele leaving? Those are the questions they'll have to ask. If they think they have the answers to it, go ahead. Take Connor Geekie at 14 if he's available for sure. But if you think the center is already locked up for the future because you have 3 of your top 5 prospects, I think it's got to be defense.
So I'm going to say something. So obviously I agree. I think the Jets should go with the defenseman, but I have Matejchuk going somewhere else actually. And I actually have the Winnipeg Jets taking Frank Nazar. Now, I know what people are going to say. Winnipeg's offensive core is stacked. Yes, but there's one thing that I've noticed with the Winnipeg Jets. It's the fact that I think that their locker room chemistry has been very, very toxic for years, and there's been a lot of rumors about that. And I have a feeling that they're going to trade some forwards this offseason. Mark Scheifele's a guy that I've heard rumors about. Blake Wheeler's another guy that I've heard rumors about. And I think adding a guy like Frank Nazar to the Winnipeg Jets would not only, change the dynamic of the forward core a little bit, because I think they have an elite forward core already, but I think if you're moving a guy like Mark Scheifele and if you're moving a guy like Blake Wheeler, adding a guy like Frank Nazar kind of takes the pain away from having to make a trade like that. And I think that's kind of where Winnipeg's at. I think their D-core, I know it has been weak in recent years, but I think it's something that Winnipeg can definitely still, hang on to a little bit longer and maybe use a later pick to get a defenseman. But I think in this case, because of how skilled Frank Nazar is and because of how he's got a good character to him as well, I think Winnipeg needs more of that than they do defense. At least that's just my opinion. And the reason I think Matejchuk doesn't go there is because I think he goes to the next team, which is the Vancouver Canucks. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think that is because Vancouver needs defense. Yeah. I think Vancouver is a team that needs defense more than Winnipeg. And I think in terms of that, you've got Matejchuk here, and I think it's important for them to kind of, take Matejchuk because, yes, he's more offensively gifted, but he's also got that two-way game to him a little bit that I find Vancouver needs, and they don't really have that defenseman that's going to be able to help them out. I think, we know what Quinn Hughes is capable of, but after that, it kind of drops off a little bit. Ekman Larsson's not the same player. Tyler Myers is the same player, but I think if Vancouver can build their prospect pool a little bit more, add a guy like
And they're trying to
Matejchuk,
move Tyler Myers
it
and
could
Oliver
it could
Ekman
work.
Larson as
So
well.
I have
So
Matejchuk going 15, and I have Nazar going 14, and obviously I know that Data's got Nazar going 16, but I have someone else going 16. But
Yeah.
basically, what I'm trying to say is I think Matejchuk goes one down to 15, and I think Frank Nazar goes up to 14.
Yeah, I think it really just depends on are the Vancouver Canucks comfortable with saying, okay, we definitely have a deal in place for Myers and or Ekman Larson moving out of here or in the next year or so. If they're comfortable with doing that, then yeah, I could see them being the team that takes Matejchuk. But I think if they do keep their decor, because those are some tough contracts to move, and Connor Geeky's on the board, I think that they're going to have to take him.
Yeah.
They have Elias Pettersson, you got Bo Horvat, but I think Geeky's gonna be the guy who, in 2, 3, 4 years, is your third line centerman. As Bo Horvat gets closer to retirement in 3, 4 years, he's gonna slowly slot into number 2 because he's a bit of a project in his own at number 15.
Yeah.
Geeky, really good size, man. The guy's 6'4". He's gonna be over 200 pounds when he's playing in the NHL. A big centerman who just needs to continue to refine his skills. You can't teach size. Teams love this kind of player. As it usually goes with these bigger guys, you got to work on skating. But if he already has the vision, the IQ, all that, it's a very, very high ceiling, and it just has to be cultivated well. Everywhere I look, I see Geeky 8 to 15. As I said earlier, Craig Button has him at 31. This is just appalling, but I think 15 is on the lower end. I would not be surprised at all if he goes earlier. Same with Frank Nazar, but definitely not at the end of the round. Geeky will go before 20, in my opinion.
Well, moving on to number 16 and the final one of the day for me. So look, obviously you have Frank Nazar. I agree. I think Frank Nazar is a good player to have there. I think Buffalo does go with another forward here. But I have someone different. I have someone that's a little bit outside the box and hasn't really been mentioned. I have Liam Ogren going to Buffalo. The reason why is because I think Liam Ogren is one of those guys that we're going to look at in 3 to 4 years from now, and we're going to say, oh my God, Buffalo got a steal.
He has crazy numbers.
And his numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And the numbers that he put up this year are just they're impeccable. And I think that that's one of the things that I like about this pick for Buffalo as well. He's a guy that I think can come into the NHL and kind of just continue putting up those numbers. I think he's really got that type of talent. And so for Buffalo, you've already with this establishment of, putting themselves in a position where they go, you know what, we're going to go and get a guy like Connor Geeky, like I mentioned. Well, now you've got Connor Geeky and you go and you add Liam Ogren to that mix. Well, now you've got yourself a really good forward core to build up to your already really good defensive core in Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. And obviously, if Luukkonen ends up panning out, well, you've got yourself your goaltender. And I think that then you've got yourself a really good foundation there for Buffalo. Yep. So I like Nazar. I think Nazar is another pick that if he falls to 16, I do think Buffalo takes him. But I think that if Nazar is already gone and you have other opportunities, I think a guy like Liam Ogren makes a ton of sense for a team like Buffalo.
It does. And it definitely has to be a winger here because no matter who it is at number 9, I think it has to be a centerman. We had said like Karamaki, maybe he goes to the wing, whatever. I think it's one of those forwards. But then whether it's Nazar, whether it's Ogren, whether it's some of the other wingers that are very highly touted like Snuggerud, Isaac Howard, guys like that, I think that this is a perfect complementary piece to the Buffalo Sabres. They have the defense, the center. It's very mix and match for the centers and the wings who plays who. But regardless, if you have the players, if you have the horses, you're good to go. You'll find where you can place them. I'm surprised. Well. Sorry, Chris?
I have Frank Nazar number 16 as well.
Right, and it's surprising that Central Scouting has him ranked down at number 21 for North America skaters, not number 21 of the draft, number 21 of just.
That's crazy.
I'm very surprised at that. He's one of those guys that I think Central Scouting really missed on. As they miss all the time. I was just doing some research, like they had Matty Beniers as the number 6 North America forward last year. He got drafted 2nd overall, stuff like that. So Nazar, good speed, great skill, really nice release off the rush. As most, it's nothing new. He needs more strength. It's as most 17, 18.
And what I like about him, he's very expendable as well. He could play right wing and center as well. So you could place him in multiple situations as well. And that's the beauty about Buffalo as well. A guy like Tage Thompson who could play both wings and center. People can move around. Casey Middlestack could play left wing and center. You know,
Mhm.
like if it doesn't work out for example, Middlestat, Luca was saying he's not a big fan of him at center. We could always move him to the wing and put Nazar there. You know, so I mean, but that's like of a Buffalo, a very expendable team in terms of like the players that they have. You could shift them in different positions to see what works and what doesn't. And maybe one season you have maybe a guy like Nazar playing center, the next season maybe he's more comfortable playing on the wing. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's always good that that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good problem to
Yeah,
have. And
I
another good
agree.
problem to have is the number of prospects here. Like just as we're closing out, there are a good number of prospects. There's McGroarty, Bell is what a name, Snuggeroo, Howard, Seamus Casey, Ogren. There's a lot of good names, and even Ivan Miroshnichenko, a guy who only because of Hodgkin's lymphoma is he going to be going down to whatever a late first
Oh,
round pick.
I had Miroslachenko in my top 10. If without his Hodgkin's lymphoma, obviously his disease, I think he would be in my top 10. But I think
Oh,
because of the
absolutely.
uncertainty there,
I think he'd be top
he'd be
five
fine.
even. I think that's how
Yeah.
high he would be. So I think I wouldn't even be surprised if he drops to the second round just because it's a big risk with that.
Oh, if I'm telling
You
you,
know,
man, if Montreal's got that 30-second pick and
maybe
he's there, you
if he
take
even
him.
plays. I saw some things say like he would like to continue to pursue a career. Like that's makes me feel a bit shaky when he's saying I would like to try and continue,
Yeah.
as opposed to like I'm definitely gonna no matter what I'm gonna keep pushing. I don't know. I really don't know enough about the situation to make a judgment, but I just to say he would be a top 5 guy. He's going to go probably between I don't know 20 to 35, something like that. And if he does end up beating this, as he Lord willing will, he's going to be a huge star. And there's
Yeah,
a lot of big names that, any of these guys from like 12 to 16 can be in and out with Howard,
very
Snuggeroo,
interchangeable to be
very
honest.
interchangeable class. Yeah.
And the last thing I'm gonna add on to 14 and 15. The reason why I have them both. I agree with both of your points, but the reason why I would change those two is because of Statsny leaving, because of Shifley leaving. They're gonna need a center prospect, so Geeky makes sense. And then in Vancouver, there's rumors with Oliver Ekman Larson and also Tyler Myers, and Quinn Hughes can't do it all by himself, right? So getting a guy like Matejchuk makes sense. So I mean, both situations, whether Geeky goes to Winnipeg or Vancouver, or Matejchuk goes to Winnipeg or Vancouver, it works out for both of them because it addresses needs of theirs. But for me, I just feel more comfortable with Geeky going to Winnipeg and Matejchuk going to Vancouver. So,
Mhm.
guys, I don't know if you have anything else to
Yeah.
conclude with
No,
in
I'm
terms
good.
of the top 16, but we just wanted to, on behalf of the Young Guns podcast, thank everyone who's been with us yesterday during the NHL lottery draft, and also today during our top 16 mock draft of what's to come at the draft. Obviously, we're gonna do a full blown draft prediction once we have the exact order, and hopefully, Data could join us on that episode too, since he's very knowledgeable in terms of prospects. And uh, we just like to thank him as well for coming on and collaborating with us, because it's been an absolute honor and a privilege to hear someone that has been on YouTube for for many years now, and with your knowledge and you're so like analytic in terms of these prospects, you add a lot more depth and a better understanding of what to expect in terms of these young men that are being drafted at this year's draft.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that a lot, Chris. And if anybody's watching who also likes that type of analytic type thing, that's what it is over on the YouTube channel, Data782. It's franchise mode, NHL 22, even other sports, FIFA 22, NHL 07 Dynasty mode, live streams of MLB The Show, Formula One, a lot of management type things like that, as well as podcast type analytic breakdowns. I've done some videos where it's redrafting certain classes of players, where it's analyzing the playoffs or the trade deadline, stuff like that. So if you enjoy what happens at the Young Guns podcast, I'm sure you would also enjoy what's happening over on my channel as well.
Well,
We'll put the
thanks.
link down below.
Absolutely.
It's gonna make it
Perfect.
easy.
Well, thanks once again for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching. I know it's been a long episode, but again, when you have a guy like Data and you have a guy like Luca, two analytical monsters, they're really gonna go down and get dirty with this type of
In
stuff. And they
depth.
love this stuff. This is what they're good at. So I applaud them for really going, doing a deep analysis on only the top 16. I can't imagine how long a video would be if we covered all 32 in the first round.
That's where it really gets interchangeable.
You guys are stuck with me at the draft. I remember that.
Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to check out Data's content as well. And we'll see you on the next episode. So thank you guys once again, and see ya.
See ya.
Peace.